Hello, my name is Nathan Marsky, and this is my channel, The Digital Scribe. Today, I'd like to talk to you about why I think you should be learning to code, even if you don't want to be a programmer. This is going to be the first part in a series of episodes on beginner coding that I'm going to be doing. This episode, I'm mainly focusing on both why you would want to learn how to code, even if you have no interest at all in becoming a software developer of any sort, and also to clear up some misconceptions that I think a lot of people have about learning to code, and also to show some resources that you can get started in if you want to jump in. Um, with um, Having talked with a number of people that have either just never considered coding at all for one reason or another, often because I believe they have some misconceptions about what's involved, and then other people that have tried and have given up, whether they took a college course or um, attempted to do a tutorial or what have you, and just were not able to get started. And again, I think some of them either had a bad introduction to programming or approached it with some misconceptions that sabotaged their initial attempt. So, first, why should you learn? Specifically, if you aren't interested in becoming a software developer. Well, the first reason I think is it can be fun. I think a big problem that gets in the way of people having fun coding is their initial mindset. Most things that can be fun aren't fun when you approach it with the wrong mindset. You have to be willing to have fun. That's where if you like start a movie and you go into it looking to find something to for it something wrong with it, whether um, you are looking being overly critical about special effects, or if you're um, looking for something to nitpick about the acting or what have you, if you go in trying to find fault, you will find fault. Whereas if you try to just relax and have fun, more than likely you are going to have fun. Um, Obviously, there are exceptions. And so, same with programming. If you approach it in the right way, it can be fun. Whether you treat it almost like solving a puzzle, and there's even websites that have programming puzzles that you can solve. Then there's also just games. I got into coding in a large part to make my own games. And that is also can be very rewarding and fun. I've made several games that I then enjoyed playing on my own, and I eventually want to get to the point where I'm releasing them, um, releasing games for sale. Haven't got to that point yet, but I hope in sometime soon. But you know, even as just a hobby, you know, if you enjoy solving puzzles, if you enjoy building things, programming is a nice way to, a nice expression of those kinds of interests. Another big reason is automation. Even if you aren't going to be a programmer, the thing is that a lot of people use computers, either in their day to day life, for their school, for work, at home, um, with their other hobbies. Because that's where, if you're into music, you probably use a computer to help with recording or editing music. If you're into video editing, or video making or photography, you're probably using a video editor, um, or a photo program, or if you're a writer, you're using a word processor and potentially some other tools. Pretty much everybody uses a computer at some point, and and a lot of programs, whether operating systems or tools, have built-in functionality that allows you to use a coding language to modify or automate some features. Like, for example, the media player VLC can be, you can write your own plugins allowing you to automate various tasks that you do on a regular basis. Um, a lot of like image editing software like GIMP also has um, a plugin feature where you can write your own plugins and customize your own tools and so on. With your operating system, I mean, at my job, I've written a batch file that allows me to just double click on it, and it will automatically open up all the programs that I use for work every day with just one single command. And so, um, exactly how you go about this is going to depend on which programs you use, which operating system you use, and so on. But if you take the time to read up on the documentation, you can, and then just think about what tasks you do on a regular basis, and specifically ones that you do repetitively. You can find little ways to um, automate those repetitive tasks, freeing up more time for the things that actually matter. Sort of an very similar reason, or even a more involved reason, is do-it-yourself projects. If you are really gung-ho into sort of do-it-yourself projects, or like also like into like being more having a more self-sufficient lifestyle or household, there's a lot of um, coding related things you can do, especially in conjunction with electrical engineering, and gadgets. Um, Nowadays there is a you can get a lot of like small microcomputers for very, very cheap, and you can build your own like computerized door systems, camera systems. You can basically build your own smart house with some time, effort, and study. And it's not as hard as you would think, although it's still a lot of work. But I mean, if you do DIY stuff, that doesn't scare you. But learning to code opens up what you can accomplish in that regard greatly. Another good thing is also just in the sense of self-improvement. Coding forces you to think things through logically and step by step. Very often, it's very easy to get caught up in the flow of life, and um, it takes a it often takes a lot of effort to like make sure that you break everything down into digestible chunks so you're not overwhelmed. That's something that is essential to programming, and so practicing it in sort of like the confines of a coding task can potentially be a good exercise for extending that into the rest of your life. And so it's just a really good mental exercise as well. And then finally, with the preponderance of technology out there, um, you can also learn coding to help work with your kids and have them learn as well. And then if your kids learn at a young age, that's going to set them up better for being able to interact with technology at a higher level, and actually, rather than being like passive consumers of technology, actually being able to control it. Now I want to clear up some of the misconceptions. A lot of people, I think, approach programming with some of the wrong mindset, some of the wrong expectations, and I think specifically when they don't have a clear idea of why they're learning in the first place, and if they're not even sure if they want to do it or if they can do it. The really big thing is the association with programming and math. Now, programming, yes, at its lowest level is dealing with numbers, because effectively in a computer, everything is numbers. That being said, at its core, the act of programming is not doing math. What programming is simply writing down instructions. A computer program ultimately is no different than um, like a work plan or a menu or a to-do list or any other series of instructions. It's just a series of instructions that you have set forward for the computer to follow step by step. Um, and so, as long as you're able to take a problem, break it down into steps, and work out how those steps are to be done, you can write a program. For most general programming tasks, the math needed is really no more complex than pretty much any other general task, because that's where, if you think about it, if you're doing cooking, you need to do math. If you're doing carpentry, you need to do math. Do your taxes. That level of just general adulting math is perfectly fine for most general programming tasks, especially if you aren't being a professional. Gonna be a professional. Most time when math, serious math gets involved, it's usually at higher level coding, specifically professional coding, whether you're doing like statistics with like data science, or like geometry and trigonometry for graphical programming, and statistics again if you're just doing like complicated random numbers for certain, for um, um, more serious gaming type projects, and so on and so forth. If you're doing, more serious coding, like professional level coding, depending on what type of coding you're doing, yes, math, higher level math becomes useful. But for just general coding and just getting started, just average, you know, basic math will cover you far. And the few times that something more than that is necessary, a lot of times you can just, there's pre-established material that you can basically just copy and paste, and so you don't actually have to do math for it. Another big thing is you don't need to buy anything. The thing is that even without any material I'm going to be releasing, there is now, you know, right now, so many good tutorials and documentation, and both in like video format as in written format, and then add in the possible use of AI chat as a tutor, which can be a big help. you can one learn so much about coding on your own, that and then pretty much every tool you're going to need to do even professional level coding, frankly, is available for free online. And, not in the sketchy way, just, from reputable sources. There's, you know, editors, compilers, and so on. In fact, depending on what type of coding you want to do, you, if you have a computer, you have pretty much everything you need already on your computer. Um, you know, right now, like especially like HTML and JavaScript, because it runs off a browser. So if you have a browser, if you have a basic text editor, which all computers come with a basic text editor, whether it's Microsoft Notepad on Windows or something like Kedit on some versions of Linux, you have some form of text editor that can save an HTML file and you can open it in your browser, and you can put JavaScript code in the HTML file that will then run like a program. That's where the text you see on the screen right now is from an HTML file that I wrote, and the text appearing is from a JavaScript um, JavaScript code that I wrote that responds to me pressing the spacebar key. And so um, there's no like monetary commitment. Pretty much the only hobby level thing where you're likely to want to um, buy anything is if you're getting into very specific hardware projects, like you are getting into like hobby electronics and programmable microcontrollers, or if you want to experiment with robotics, or you want to build your own server, then you might be buying equipment. But software, there's nothing to buy. um Another thing is you do not need to worry about choosing the right language or tool to start with. um I plan on making the next episode about guiding you towards where you might want to start depending on where your interests lie. But ultimately, whatever you choose to start with is perfectly fine and will lead you to give you skills that are applicable to whatever you choose to do next. Because ultimately, and this is a big misconception, a lot of people focus on the tools and the programming languages and so on, but the most important thing about programming is a way of thinking, and that's something that goes from language to language to language and from tool to tool. It's, again, that core breaking down a problem into its logical components, and then, defining the problem and then its solution. And the programming languages and the software are just tools to make that happen. And once the skills you develop in solving that problem in one language almost directly applies to solving that in another language. And that's where a lot of times when you're learning a new programming language, it's about, okay, how can I use this to apply what I already know, rather than being something completely new. Um, so how to start. I'm going to go more into this in the second episode, but for now, if you want to like just get started, then there's a few resources that I'd like to point you to that are just really good for absolute beginners. So the first is a website called W3 Schools. I'll have a link in the description along with the other websites that I'll mention. It's one of the better general tutorial sites I've come across as far as just scope. It has most of the more popular languages and tools that are out there with tutorials and built-in um, practice where you can practice those languages on the website without having to download anything or install anything on your computer. W3 Schools also has even a built-in you can, if you set up an account, you can set up your own mini site where you can practice hosting a website and practice web development, both with like databases and HTML and so on. And so it's a good site to just experiment with different programming languages without having any, having to download anything to your computer. And so and a lot of the tutorials are fairly easy to follow and get you started on that language, especially um, and then once you get started, you can supplement with other tutorials and information from other websites or books or what have you. Another one is Online GDB. This is basically a collection of online compilers for multiple different languages. So this is just online tools that you can use to practice various languages, including some languages that aren't um, listed on W3 Schools. Um, so it's just a good resource for practicing coding on in any number of different languages without necessarily having to do it on your computer. Depending on, again, your computer situation, or if you just want to experiment without, worrying about messing anything up, it's a good way to get started. And especially if you want to practice in something that's not available with W3 Schools, because W3 Schools also has practice tools for the languages that they have tutorials in. Um, and then finally, there's quickref.me. It's basically a collection of cheat sheets. This is not so much as to learn as more of a reference material once you start learning. Because again, when you're learning programming, um, you shouldn't bother about memorizing anything. That's actually something I forgot to add in as a misconception, is that you need to memorize a lot of things. And ultimately, what you need to be focusing in on is just adjusting your thinking and focus on breaking down the problems and learning patterns of problem solving. Um, the specific commands and functions and the syntax, the language features. Frankly, a lot of those you're gonna automatically memorize the ones you use commonly, and the ones you don't use commonly. Tools like this are helpful, where it you know say there's something that you don't do very commonly. It's like, oh, how do I do that? I know what I want to do. It's just a matter of the specific spelling. So it's really no different than looking it up in a dictionary when you forget how to spell a obscure word that you don't use very often. And so QuickRef Me will it's got pages on different programming languages as well as certain computer programs where so it'll um, help remind you about various bits of syntax and various commands that you can use. It doesn't have a huge amount of information about what they do. It expects you to know, for the most part, what you can do. It's just a reference for like this, it's basically, the spelling and the format that you need for it. It is a reference material. It's a cheat sheet. It is not to learn new things. It is just to remind you once you have already learned. So, again, I would really encourage, you know, I think most people would benefit from learning a little bit of coding, even if you don't do it commonly, just knowing it's really no different than learning how to like change the oil in your car, or um, you know, learn how to, um, reset the, the breakers in your house when, there's a power surge or something. You know, there is, it's just like basic. You have a computer, it's good to know a little bit about how it works. And that's where learning coding will teach you a little bit more about how computers work in the, foundationally. So um, you, that might affect generally how you interact with the computer, and understand a little bit better about, what's going on when something goes wrong, why certain things work this way they do, which sometimes just makes things less frustrating, when even when it's not going the way you want it to go. When you at least know why it might be happening, then it's just not like random. There's a reason for it. And then also just opening up um, new opportunities, because that's where, even if you initially just learn a little bit of coding and then you don't do much else, the point is that that introduces you to that possibility. And then later down the road, when you come across a situation where it's like, hey, I'd really like a small little tool that does this, and it's like, wait, I could build that myself. And that's where the thing is, I've made little tools both at work, at home. Sometimes for one-off uses. I've literally written a program that was only going to be used once. And so I wrote it for a to do that one task. But it was a task that would have been taking me a lot longer to actually do manually than to the time it took me to write the program. And so, yeah, I would really encourage you to try, and especially for parents, especially parents that are homeschooling. But even if you're not homeschooling, if you got kids, learning a bit of coding, and then introducing them to coding at a young age would also be a great um, way of getting them started, both with computers, but also just, again, it introducing them to think in a little bit more structured way, and use reasoning skills. So all in all, I hope you found this helpful. I hope um, you know I really hope you do get into coding and have fun with it. But in the meantime, if you found this helpful, please like, subscribe, share the video, um, and have a wonderful day, and God bless you.